It's important to us to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on stolen land. I am based amongst the powerful sandstone ridges, valleys and waterfalls of Durrig and Gundungurra land. And Holly lives amongst the rugged plains, hills and timbered mountains of Ngunnawal and Ngambri land.
We need to give you a content warning for this episode, although you may have received a hint from the title. This episode contains information about stalkers, being stalked, harassed. If that kind of stuff is particularly triggering to you, or if you just want to tap out, here is your chance. The stories that we're talking about today are our experiences. They are real experiences, but we will have omitted some of the darker details and some of the specifics today for a number of reasons. There are a lot of people in this industry who have experienced stalking and violence to a higher degree than what we describe in this episode, including us in a way. But there are also many who never will experience it. This is not any sort of statement on, the prevalence or the severity or anything like that. This is just us discussing our experiences. We also need to warn you that we will be mentioning sexual assault as part of this episode as well. So that's another thing to make a decision on whether you are ready to hear that right now.
Welcome to Somebody You Love, or The Sale of Two Titties. I'm Jenna Love.
And I'm Holly Hart.
And we're experts in disappointing our parents, breaching community guidelines, and banging the people who vote against our rights. I want to be really clear at the top of this episode that whilst many of our peers have experienced stalking, harassment and violence, this is not an inherent outcome of sex work. The reasons these sorts of things have happened to us are varied, complex and nuanced, but they include things like sex work stigma, untreated mental illness, entitlement to women and women's bodies in the case where a woman is a victim, like us, parasocial relationships, and really inadequate sex and relationships education. We don't need to tell you that plenty of people who are not sex workers have, of course, also experienced stalking and harassment. And plenty of sex workers have experienced it outside of the industry. We are not more likely to be victims of violence because we sell sex. We are more likely to be victims of violence because people think the fact that we sell sex makes us less than human. And as you know, the whole point of this podcast from day one has been to try and shift that perception.
All right. What led to this episode finally taking shape? This is not a new thought, a new concept of an episode for us. I think we discussed this years ago to begin with, but there was hesitation on both of our ends because obviously the nature of this topic can potentially encourage people that we've had those issues with historically to feel like they have a right of reply or to feel some sort of encouragement in regards to contacting us or continuing their absolute nonsense. So although we felt it's a really important topic and something that's prominent in our lives or has been prominent, it's been something that we've both been a little cautious to even talk about. A few weeks ago, I don't know what came over me, but I was a little bit curious, and for whatever reason I googled one of the people who I have a protection order out against. I googled his name and it came up with an obituary, and I was so happy. Such a dark thing to say, but to know that he was not on this planet anymore was such a relief. I didn't even realize at the time, in the next week or two, the feelings of just freedom that came over me were really surprising to me. I don't think I had realized for all of that time how much he was hanging over me in everything I did until it wasn't. So that was huge. And I think that knowledge has given me the comfort to finally talk about it. And I don't know whether funny's the right thing to say, but the interesting thing about this situation is that he was not a violent person. I wasn't frightened at any point for my life or of violence. I was frightened psychologically, and for my safety, I just felt harassed and overwhelmed and those emotions. But even something of that, I want to say that magnitude, that non-magnitude, that minimitude, that really disturbed me. And there are other incidents that I've been through that are more disturbing in a number of ways. Anyway, look, God, I don't know what the point is that I'm trying to make here, but yeah, you just don't know how much something's affecting you, and these things really stay with you, even for somebody tough like me.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point because a lot of people who have not been stalked and or harassed and experienced these things don't realize what it actually looks like. It can take lots of different forms. I deeply regret how I used to feel about stalking. I remember when I was younger and if I encountered somebody who said that they had a stalker, I was quite dismissive of that. I really didn't realize how much of a massive impact it has on your life and every minute of your day. And I think that, you know, my experience with these people that I'm going to be sharing, everyone that I've had any experience like this with has been adamant that they are not harassing me and that they are not stalking me. And I think there's a lot of things that people don't realize actually do constitute stalking and harassment and really make someone else's life hell. And I think that's what's really valuable to talk about. It's not sort of like in the movies where there's a man wearing black in the bushes filming you at home. I'm sure that can happen, but there's a lot more to it than that.
God, you said that so perfectly. None of them ever think that they're doing anything wrong, or if they do know that what they're doing is wrong, they think that there's some justification. Or anyway, it's a really complex thing, and I'm glad we're going to talk about this today. And I'm really sad to think that there's a lot of people who will relate today because this is common. So today I am going to talk about David. I started seeing David as a client on the first day, I think, of 2018. It started like any normal client-provider relationship. He was a little bit strange, but I didn't find him stressful. Over time, he saw me more frequently. I rewarded his regularity with less strict timekeeping, so I would stay a little bit longer. As my rates increased during that time, he was on my grandfathered rates, so I kept him on the old rates. As my rates increased, I didn't charge him an out-call fee because he lived about 3 streets over from me. You know, I looked after him. The other factor that was important to me was that he had a very elderly dog that I fell in love with. I was really attached to this dog and really looked forward to seeing her whenever I would go for a booking at his house. So yeah, all was proceeding as normal, and after about 6 months, he became increasingly demanding and neurotic. There was not one particular thing that stood out in that time as hugely insane. We've talked about the somebody you love scale. He wasn't doing anything that was on the scale of I need to end this relationship with this client. They were things that were a little bit grating, but they were tolerable within the context of doing my job. And particularly at the time, I believe I was starting my saving for a house deposit, and I was willing to endure idiosyncrasies that now I would not put up with. I wanted to list for you guys just a bunch of little things that he did that were annoying or that were little red flags, and they're not. None of these things individually are problematic. It was just that I found cumulatively that they were signals of a lack of respect or an obsession or a weird perspective that in hindsight concerning. At the time, and spaced out over a year and a half of seeing him, they just seemed annoying. But in hindsight, it's interesting to reflect on. So this is what he wanted. David insisted upon bank transfer payments to pretend it's not a factor in our relationship. Those were his exact words. So he was very invested in the illusion that there was not payment happening between us for what we were doing. He always insisted on as late at night as possible. I often would have to cancel because I'm a sleepy girl as it is, but I would start to fall asleep at 9, 10 p.m. anyway. And so it was obvious that I was having a hard time with it. I would ask for 6 or 7. He would insist that 9 or 10 p.m. was when he could perform at his best. And I just endured that and did my best to turn up at 9 or 10 p.m. He referred to my peers as your sisters and the sisterhood, giving us this like cult like status or some sort of weird, I don't even know what to describe it as, but it was really patriarchal and infantilizing. And I always found that really off putting. His messages became needier and needier over time. He increasingly developed issues with delayed ejaculation, and that's very normal, but he got more and more frustrated with that. He was obsessed with persisting with the sexual activity to the very last minute, to the point where I was exhausted every time because it wasn't happening. And plenty of your, Jenna, and my clients, those things happen sometimes, and it's most often, that the client will say, do you know what? I just don't think this is going to happen today. And we both go, all right, let's relax. I think the obsession with driving it out to try and get that last minute in case it happened was not helping the issue. He started sending messages hinting about ending his life. He bought some candles for his home for our bookings. Then he started texting me saying, oh, you hate them anyway. It's fine. I'll try to return the candles. He started saying things like if I was not available on a certain night, he'd say, oh, well, it's because you bumped me for a VIP, which was really insulting because I was very clearly treating him like a VIP, and it disregarded how generous I was being with my time and financially. At some point, again, you might be listening to this and thinking, wow, you're an idiot, Holly, but these are all really small things within the dynamic that just built up. So I still regarded him as a fine client, a really annoying one, but So at some point he was cleaning his car, doing a deep clean detail, and I suggested he wash my car in exchange for a booking. And he agreed, and that was not a problem. So I dropped the car off and he cleaned my car, and I thought I had cleaned everything out of it, but unfortunately I had left a piece of paperwork in there with my name on it, which was a disaster. He mentioned to me that he found my real name, which I'm going to say that you really would have had to look at it at the piece of paper. If you had any respect, you'd probably just put whatever you found in the car out of the way and ignore it. But he unfolded that piece of paper and had a look at what my name was. Then for the next few months, every few months he'd bring something up and he'd say, oh, I just don't know what name to call you. And I had to keep saying to him, you don't know any other names for me. My name is Holly. That's the only name you know. It was infuriating. He texted me saying, oh, I feel ever so inadequate, and wouldn't elaborate on what. I was like, what's the problem? Oh, no, I won't tell you. And then he requested that whenever I speak to him, I say his name. And that was the weirdest thing. I'm going to read you the messages because I think it's quite entertaining. Good morning, Holly. Another lovely time with you. Unless it's policy not to, could you in future maybe use my name when we're together or texting? It would mean a lot to me. David. I said, I do use your name, don't I? Probably not when texting, but I'll make an effort to do so more. He said, I don't think I've ever heard you say my name. Sorry to be so insecure and needy. I feel like sometimes I don't matter. Hearing or seeing my name would make such a difference. P.S. It's the same across the board. I asked one of his only friends, whose name I always use, to do the same. I said, oh, that's so weird. He said, of me? I said, yes. If my friend asked me to do that, I would think it's so weird. He said, okay, you probably would think it's weird, but you probably hear your name a lot. So maybe not weird, insecure? I said, no, I probably don't hear or see my name a lot. I don't know. It is still really weird. I don't think I can organically do it. I sort of don't speak people's names at them. Anyway, I'll try to keep it in mind, but it's awkward and unnatural for me, so I might not remember. He said, it's probably an old school thing. No one has time these days. For example, my older 40 plus customers use my name in text all the time. I have one thread and she uses my name in every message. And I said, it's not that. It's just weird to ask someone to do it. It's sort of like inventing a nickname for yourself. It's just very fake to ask people to say things they don't usually say. He said, it is weird. I see that now. So please stop. And then he became very sulky. Anyway, really bizarre. And I don't know what the whole point of it was, but it was like a controlling vibe, right? I'm not even sure how to explain what a weird thing that was. Like, It feels salesy to me when somebody says my
Yes,
name all the time.
absolutely.
Like I like it as a politeness thing, but if you use someone's name just constantly, it's so weird. So yeah, these were all these little things where he just got stranger and stranger.
I think it quite possibly is a generational thing, but you're right. The problem isn't the using of the names, it's the requesting someone to. And like, it's very odd. And then being like, you're right, please stop. Like, what? Oh, it's, yeah, I don't think you need to explain why that's weird. I find it very bloody weird.
Towards the end, David texted me 3 days in a row. One day he texted me to say he was at his sister's house, which is around the corner from mine in Mawson, and he needed to escape. I ignored that message. He texted the next day, suggesting an off-the-clock catch-up for lunch. I declined. He texted the next day, asking for a last-minute booking. I declined because I was busy that night, and I offered another day. The next day he texted me saying, "Rest in peace," his dog's name. And I heard that and I thought the dog had passed away naturally. The dog was very old. I want to clarify that the dog genuinely was in its last months of its life. This dog was pretty much at its time. So I responded to him and I said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that she's gone. I'm devastated. I really loved that dog." And he clarified that he had put her to sleep. And I couldn't help but feel that he did this to get my attention, because for 3 days in a row he was trying to get to see me and I was not available, not responding. And then the next thing was suddenly that he had put the dog to sleep and he had not given me an opportunity to say goodbye to the dog or anything like that. It was, I could be wrong, but I strongly suspect that was why he did that.
I think you're right.
So look, I really want to clarify that it was the dog's time, but I think it was a reactionary thing. I messaged him. I was pissed off. Let's say for a couple of weeks there was a bit of back and forth where I was asking him, why now? And he kept saying, because she was sick and old. And I said, I know why, but why now? Why today? Like, why did you feel like this had to happen all of a sudden? And he was very evasive with his answers. And I don't need to say what I think. I think I've made that clear. It was really, really sad. But it was the right thing for her. But the intention behind it was really disturbing to me. The final thing that happened, the final straw for me, was a couple of weeks later, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later. He sent me a message and he said, "I just have to ask, Holly, while it's still on my mind. You once said and made me feel like I was a VIP client. But am I no longer, or are you maybe tiring of me? I want to remind our listeners that I was being very generous with this client anyway. I had been really, really good to him." So that to me was like being slapped in the face. It was so ungrateful. This was the final straw. So my response was quite aggressive. I said to him, "Okay, darling, you're not convinced? If you don't believe you're treated like a VIP, you cannot be one. The rate for my outcall is XYZ dollars. The time on the clock is strict and begins from the moment I walk through the door. I must be heading out the door on the hour sharp. Don't bother texting outside of messages to arrange bookings. That's my non-VIP circumstances. Cool?" And he wrote back and said, "Why?" And I said, "Because you clearly don't appreciate the things I do outside of my basic job requirements for you." And he said, "I do." I said, "Apparently not, if you think you're not a VIP. What a rude thing to say." He said, "You've misunderstood me. I have appreciated you so much. Seems there's only one way to fix this." I said, "How have I misunderstood you?" He said, "I won't bother you anymore." And I said, "Right, that doesn't make any sense." He replied, "I can't just not bother you again. Sorry, it was a stupid question to ask, but it was neither the question I meant to ask or meant rudely. I was in fact meaning to ask something completely different, but as I seemingly so often do, I chose the wrong words. I know and have always appreciated what you do and have done for me. My delusional self thought that you might do these things because you like me and enjoy your time with me. You once muttered these words to me, 'You must know that I like ... but you didn't finish the sentence. Maybe for good reason, or maybe it's a ruse you use with every client. I'll never know. So when I asked, what I meant was to ask whether you like me just a little, and therefore for that reason also do all of the above. I guess I wanted to know and should have used plain language, but in my confused mind could not. I hope you remember the not always small things I do for you, including buying $50 fuel cards to augment my privilege status and rate. So a few things I want to unpack there. This thing about me having said, "Oh, you must know I like," and then trailing off like some sort of fantasy book character. What? I would have just been saying something in conversation and then stopped what I was saying. This wasn't some sort of missed moment of connection of me declaring my love. Yes, I did like this person. I thought that they were a nice enough person. I really loved the dog, so that's sorry. But I didn't, there was no romantic connection. And if he had asked me that outright, I would have made that very, very clear. But clearly in his head, there was some whole other thing going on. And also him bringing up that he gave me a few $50 fuel cards, which he absolutely never needed to do. But when I was giving him hundreds of dollars off what my rate was every week is crazy. Needless to say, this was the end. I don't need to go through the back and forth of the text messages, but it was me being really pissed off that he was so ungrateful. And then he started to blame me. It's your fault for doing this. It's your fault for giving me extra time. What was I supposed to think? And it just fell apart from there. I said to him, "You're being disgusting now that you're blaming me for your ungratefulness. Don't contact me again." I blocked his number. He contacted me on Twitter. I blocked him there. He created another Twitter account, I believe. I blocked him there. He reached out to my darling other wife, Kate King, tried to book her. She declined because I remember her saying, he said, "Is it in solidarity with Holly?" And she said, "No, it's because you're a weirdo." Something along those lines, which was really, really good at the time.
I love Kate.
She's so good. Yeah, and then at some point I unblocked his number for some idiotic reason, I don't know, and he sent me something else and I had to tell him to fuck off again. And then he sent flowers to my house and it just became a thing where I could not get away from him. And the way I'm describing it doesn't sound that bad, but it was pervasive. And the fact that I kept telling him, "No, go away," and he kept finding other ways to try and communicate with me was causing me serious stress. And I said to him, oh, that's right, email was another one. And within those emails, again, he was becoming more and more vitriolic. He was becoming angrier, more frustrated, and more nasty to me on each contact. And I said to him, "If you do not stop, I will need to get a protection order." And he wrote something back that was really cynical and snarky. And I went, "Fine." So I went and I proceeded and got the protection order, which was granted for 12 months. After I got the protection order, I did receive a message from another number, which ended up being him. I didn't realise at the time. The person had a little bit of attitude. It was a normal, quote unquote, normal booking request. The person though was a little bit weird, and so I was told them to fuck off essentially. And he wrote back being like, "Having a bad day, are we?" And then, months later, I found out that that was also his number, and that was disturbing and also comedic that I had flagged him as an idiot, even though he was, I don't know, maybe trying to waste my time with a fake booking, or I'm not sure. But I'd blocked the number anyway. He then signed up for forums, and as anyone who has listened to this podcast and heard us mention forums, we don't like to talk about them too much because we don't want to give them attention. But the kind of stuff he was posting on the forums was foul. How did I know it was him? People wonder that sort of thing sometimes, and I'm not going to give it away, but I knew who his account was. And once I knew that, I didn't ever give it away to him that that's what I knew, but it allowed me to keep an eye on him for the next few years, and just make sure that he wasn't talking about me. I always had this feeling because he knew a lot about me and I didn't know what he was going to do again. So that allowed me to surveil his intentions to some extent. But the things that he was posting about women were disgusting. The way that he talked about women, the way that he saw us as a privileged sisterhood who was out to hurt men, who were taking advantage of the system, who were, our whole life ethos was to rip off and hurt men, was really foul and really disturbing. And he fixated on that for the next 5 years. when it came time for my protection order to be renewed or for it to expire, I let it lapse because he had not contacted me in that period and I didn't feel like he was a threat. So I let it go. And thankfully, he didn't contact me again. He did mention me at one point on a forum, but not in any kind of way that stressed me out. So that was that. That was David, and now he's dead. So that's a relief. But yeah, I didn't realize how much stress it had caused me. Even though there was not a feeling of violence, it was a feeling of being watched and a feeling of being followed. And when I moved to my new house here, I know that one of the biggest reasons I never put where my suburb was, or I've been really cautious about that online, was because I think of him. I think of him finding that and, I don't know, using it somehow, or just various things we've talked about on this podcast. The whole past few years in my head has been that he is watching us and he is paying attention and following, and he, again, mentioned the podcast on a forum, and it just hangs over you and it's so pervasive. And now that he's gone, I can feel how much that hung over me. And it's such a relief that it's over. It's sad. It's really sad that I genuinely liked certain elements of this person and that I did nice things and it could have been a great provider-client relationship, but that this person ruined it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, yeah, in that element of relief, I'm really lucky because a lot of people with stalkers and protection orders and things like that don't get that sort of relief. You know, Jenna's had her experiences. So fire away, Jenna, and share with us what you've been through.
Okay. So in July 2019, I received a booking request for a doubles booking with a friend of mine. The person requesting it, there was a little bit of back and forth. I sent through the deposit information and he didn't respond. The booking itself was like a week or so after that, so we hadn't heard back from him. So I sent an email just the day before saying, hey, have you had a chance to pay the deposit? AKA, like, is the booking still going ahead? He responded saying, sorry, I can't see you tomorrow. Don't think it's a good idea after what I found out on a Q&A, also from word of mouth as well. About your previous history. I'm so sorry. Don't think it's right. I'm not that type of guy. I just can't put myself in this position. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And my friend and I were like, what? Like, what? What is he talking about? So we responded and said, hey, that's a shame. It would have been nice for you to let us know as soon as you had made that decision, as we did put the spot aside for you, but it is what it is. And like that, you know, you didn't pay deposits. Like, we didn't say this, but, you know, this is the whole point of deposits. And then we said, we'd really appreciate some more specifics from you. What did you find out and what is the word of mouth about our history? You don't need to tell us who you heard it from, but some clarity around what is being said would be really helpful. Because we were like, are people telling stories? Like, what's going on? He wrote back and he said that Jenna has been attacked before by some client in the past. I can't put myself in the position to see you. Don't have it in me to face a lovely person like you, Jenna. I just saw Curious Cat Q&A answers. If you were in my position, you will feel the same way. So what he's referring to is that around that time I was using the app called Curious Cat. People who follow a lot of workers now on social media will have seen a lot of us are using one called NGL. There's been various iterations. And that allows people to send anonymous questions to you and you answer them. Now, I have this thing where it's really important to me to be as open and honest as possible. And I've, from a certain date, from around 2018, I made the decision to be really frank and honest about my work in particular. I've been criticised for this many times, and people have often, not so much criticised, people warn me. People love to warn me that I shouldn't be so honest and I shouldn't be so open. And I think we all know, if you've listened to the podcast before, you'll know that my pet hate is being told what to do and being given unsolicited advice. So I will not be taking on that advice. Thank you very much for your care. It's something I love about myself, so I'm sticking with it. But somebody around that time must have asked a question like, have you ever had a bad experience with a client? Because people love that question. And as you know, as listeners of the podcast, you do not ask that question. But somebody asked that, and I would have responded honestly and said, yeah, I absolutely have had. I've had multiple bad experiences with clients. You know, one that was like really particularly bad, a sexual assault. And I don't think I shouldn't say that. I think if I want to share that, then I want to share it. So that's what he's referring to here, that he's read that response. He's found out that a client has assaulted me in the past, years ago, and that's made him cancel the booking. So I made a a video response to this on Twitter at the time. And I'm pretty sure the video limit was 2 minutes 20. So it was only a shortish video. It had to be less than 2 minutes 20. And I was just talking to my followers, did not mention this person's name, said nothing about them. I just said somebody has cancelled a booking on me because they read that I've been assaulted by a client, and they've said that they can't put themselves in the position of seeing me. They don't have it in them to face a lovely person like me. And I was sharing this video because it felt... I wasn't crying or anything in the video, but I found it quite deeply upsetting to have a traumatic event used against me in that sense. Like it's you've been traumatized, and now it made me feel like he thought I was tainted, or And again, it was years ago. It's not like it happened 2 days ago and he thought, oh, she might not be in a good position right now, And I think that, I said some stuff like that in the video. I said like, does he think I'm damaged goods? Like, what's the deal? And, I said something like, if you are somebody who doesn't want to sleep with a person who has been sexually assaulted, then you probably need to stop sleeping with women. Like, if you think that you've had sex with people who haven't been sexually assaulted, if you think you've had sex with women who haven't been, then I got news for you, buddy, Anyway, so that was that. And apparently posting that video was the worst mistake of my life. That really poked the bear. So over the next 3 weeks, I received 27 emails, 2 voicemails, and 1 video from him. But these all came from various email addresses and phone numbers and social media accounts. It freaked me out. These messages varied wildly. There were threats in them. So a lot of them said things like, I have a booking coming up with you under a different name. You won't know it's me, but when I get there, you'll have to face me. A lot of it was...
fucking nightmare.
Really, terrifying. A lot of it was really very obsessive over my video and like quoting from it and saying... oh, you think you're damaged goods. Well, that says a lot about you, like trying to insult me with the language that I'd used in the video. And then some of the messages were, I'm really sorry. That was the worst mistake of my life. I shouldn't have cancelled on you. Will you give me another chance? And then some of them were pretending to be, a different person, saying if a client like upset you because he cancelled a booking, would you still take it if he apologized? It was just... yeah, it was a lot. The video he sent me was him speaking to the camera, but it was kind of backlit, so it was like a silhouette. And in that video, he said, soon you'll have to face me. So as a result, obviously that all freaked me out a lot, and I upped my screening at that point. So at that point, my screening involved getting an email address and a phone number from people. And so then I decided to add references because he contacted me on all these different things and he was threatening to book me under a different name. So I realized that I actually needed more security on that. And I think that this is a really important piece in terms of stalking and how it relates to sex work, which is that it took away part of my income. Because the higher your screening goes, the fewer bookings you're able to accept, broadly speaking. Less and less people are going to be comfortable giving you more and more information. There's a lot of absolute legends out there, obviously, who just comply and are wonderful. But it means having to say no to a lot more bookings. So not only am I stressing out about all of this, I'm also turning away work. So then one day he sent me an email. Again, it was from a different email address, different name, whatever, asking for a booking. I responded and said, hi there, thanks for your inquiry. I did suspect it was him from the way he had written. And sorry, I should clarify that all of these messages I knew were from him because he writes in quite a distinctive way and speaks in that same distinctive way, which is the only saving grace. And this is information that I've kept to myself and haven't said publicly for years. Because that was thank fuck he's too fucking stupid to actually change anything about the way he communicates. So I responded and said, thanks for the inquiry. I'm going to need 2 references from you. He wrote back and said, sorry, what do you mean by references? And I said, the names of 2 currently active sex workers that you have had bookings with. And he wrote back and said, well, that's personal because I don't think they will like you to call them up, which is not the case because it is a thing that happens in our industry. That's weird. No other provider has asked for reference. What can they say that he's good? It just makes no sense. I didn't respond to that. He sent a follow-up 5 minutes later saying, sorry, but it's not a job interview now, is it? With 5 question marks. Do you ask all your clients for references? And I responded and I said, I do now, yes. Because of you. And he wrote back and said, sorry, I found another provider who just texted me and she doesn't require references. 10 question marks. Unless you have something to offer that she won't. And I wrote back and I said, no, that's all good. You should go with her. And he came back and said, well, you don't want to see what I'm all about then, and you can decide if I'm suitable for you. It's such a shame. You've got a great look. Then from that point onwards, over the next 24-hour period, I received 10 points of contact from him. So I think mostly emails, but a few anonymous messages. And after that 24 hours, I responded to his latest email and said, please stop contacting me. Then over the next 10 days, I received 13 more contacts from him. And at that point, it was starting to massively affect my well-being. And I decided I would look into going to the police and see if anything could be done. Now, I Googled this. I was like, how does this work? What do you do? And I found a tip that I'm going to share with you because I do think it worked quite well for me. Someone had said, if you're going to the police about something like this, get all of the information together. Put together all of the evidence, put like a cover letter that gives an overview, make it like as easy as possible for them. So I did do that. I sat down and collated all of the messages I'd received from him, all of our communication. It has my responses, everything I've ever sent to him and he's ever sent to me in this one document, which is 33 pages long. Through that process, I realised that he had actually been contacting me since May.
I'm going to jump in here, but I just wanted to point out that was 33 pages and you'd never even met this man. Like, this is from a man that you'd not even had a booking with. Like, that is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when people are like, oh, you're meeting strange men, I'm like, well, you know, my hellish experience was from someone I never met. So, like, yeah. So going through that process of putting it all down on paper, I realised that he had actually been contacting me since May under various different names. So I thought that he'd been harassing me for 1 month, but it was actually 4 months. And that was that process was difficult. It was really scary for me to see it all in one place. And it was also confusing for me. I had to do a lot of cross-checking because he said at multiple times that we'd met before, and I started questioning if I had met him. I did have a photo of him from somewhere that I found, so I knew what he looked like, and I was fairly certain I hadn't met this person. None of the emails, phone numbers, whatever, had, ever met me. I knew what his voice sounded like. I was fairly certain I hadn't met him. But the thing is, he said a couple of times that he came to this gangbang that I did in 2018 for my 30th. I did a 30-man gangbang because that's the kind of legend that I am. And he referenced that multiple times and said he was there. And I was like, in that environment, I'm maybe not going to remember the details of everyone's face. So to be fair, there was a part of me that was like, maybe he was there under some other fake identity. But when I went back and saw all these previous messages, I saw that his first contact to me came through because he had found an old ad for that event. And he contacted me being like, oh my God, I can't believe you did this and I missed it. Like I didn't hear about this at the time. And so now I'm like, no, you've definitely never met me. But he really screwed with my head because there was just all these, stories. And I mean, it doesn't matter if we've met or not, but I don't know, I guess it did matter to me. I was lucky enough to have a positive experience with the police, which is not something you hear often. But I did, and I got an apprehended personal violence order issued against him, and they did it in my work name, which I've not heard of anyone else successfully getting in this country. And that was super important to me because I said, because like the thing is, right, if you go and you want to get one of these orders put in, but in order to do that, they find out more information about you, that puts you in more danger, So I was really, really grateful that was accepted.
Obviously, that was not the case with my protection order, but that was not an issue for me because he had already found out my name and I, at that point, just wanted him to stop. So, but had it been another circumstance, having to self-dox is a terrifying situation. So I'm so glad that they assisted you with that, but it's not common, and I think that it's an awful oversight.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I actually think the whole system has a real gap when it comes to non-intimate partner or domestic apprehension, violent, APVO, what are they called? Apprehended, whatever, fuck. Restraining orders, essentially. And that became really apparent to me. Like they didn't really... It seemed like completely new territory for the police to be doing this with somebody that I hadn't met. At different steps along the way, multiple different people were like, oh, so how did you meet? And I was like, we haven't met. This is like it's online harassment. And, when I had to go to court for it and looking at the sheer amount of restraining orders that go through court, like it's huge. And it seems that the vast majority of them are domestic or people known to them. And unsurprisingly, the laws, don't keep up with things. And I think that this is a big issue that's going to continue to become a bigger and bigger problem. And I think there's a bit of a gap there because it just seemed like totally uncharted territory for them. He was served the order and then said he was going to contest it, which meant that we both had to go to court and I had to show up and face him. My husband took the day off work to come with me. I was petrified and I didn't know whether I assumed in a court of law that I was going to have to say my legal name. And I'd kind of prepared a little speech around that. But I also know that in this isn't a big criminal case. Like in local courts, they're just pumping through the cases. So I was pretty terrified about that. While in line to sign in for the day, a police officer came and said, "Are you Jenna Love?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, "Can I speak to you?" And pulled my husband and I into a little private room. And he said that this guy had showed up that morning and said that he accepted the order. So thank fuck I didn't have to go through facing him in court. Once the order was in place, so here they're in place for 2 years and then you have to renew. Well, that's the standard anyway. He breached it in a number of ways, but unfortunately not in any way that was provable. So he sent me messages on Curious Cat on that anonymous thing, which I obviously promptly shut down because awful people ruin good things. And he called me from a phone booth and left me these creepy fucking voicemails. They were in this like sing-songy, high-pitched voice. And so I wasn't able to identify that it was his voice because it was obviously to kind of hide his identity from me. But I knew from the content of them that it was him because almost every message I received from him had something to do with either me having been raped in my life, which is just not that unique an event, and me having done a gangbang. So the messages would say like my first legal name. So I then knew that he had my first name at least, which is not a surprise. That's not that hard to find, but that, added a bit of upset, and he was obviously using it to upset me. And so he was going, Jenna, the rape victim who had a gangbang. And they were terrifying. It was literally out of a horror movie. So I went to the police with those recordings because they were just from a random number. I went to the police. I said, I'm almost certain this guy has breached it. I bought along copies of the messages he sent me on different platforms as well. And they were wonderful. Again, surprisingly, but they followed it up and they found out that the number was a phone booth near his address. So there's nothing that can be done. They said, we'll pick him up and talk to him and, he might admit something. They picked him up and talked to him and he didn't. He said he wanted to apply for a restraining order because I was harassing him. And thankfully, the police officer was like laughing as he told me that. So they didn't entertain that for a second. He also, similar to David, tried to book so many of my friends. It's like, yeah, if you're booking workers, like, a lot of us know each other, but it was booking my direct friends, like the people that, are very publicly my super close friends. One of them kind of accidentally accepted a booking from him. And then during the booking, she sent me a Snapchat video of her and him. So the video was like her talking to the camera and being like, hey, Jenna, I'm just here with my client. He really wants to meet you. And like panned it around to see his face there. And he was like, hi. So that was terrifying to receive. Of course, it was Snapchat. So it disappeared after viewing. And, I immediately wrote back to her and I said, what the fuck? That's my stalker. Get out of that booking now. And so that was, not pleasant for her either. She was fine. And I suspect that this person is not a physically violent person,
This is the thing.
But it doesn't change the significant impact he's had on my life.
It doesn't have to be physical violence to be deeply upsetting and stressful.
Yeah. Then he left me alone for a while. And in that time, my restraining order lapsed and I didn't bother doing it again because I thought it was all over. And to be fair, it mostly sort of has been, maybe. After that, he decided to become a quote-unquote male escort, which, was really laughable. Yeah, there's no way he ever had a booking, but he was carrying on this charade of being a male escort and trying to get into sex worker spaces. He applied for membership with Scarlet Alliance. And
For years.
And also put in he sent a complaint to Scarlet Alliance saying, there's this worker, Jenna, who's being mean to me and saying bad things about me, which was, I assume he didn't realize that I'm on the board because it was very funny when that complaint came through. And I was like, lol, no, which sounds like an abuse of power, but yeah. I mean, the CEO at that time was like, Jenna, is this guy that's been harassing you? And I was like, oh, fuck, yes. So that was all quite amusing. I'm saying amusing flippantly, but with some hindsight, I can describe it as amusing. Carried on, wrote all these things on public social media, all these negative things about me. One time I had posted a video again because of my passion for transparency I posted a video saying that I had this like sore on my lip. I'd woken up and there was a problem with my lip and I had to cancel my booking for the day. And I was just saying, it might be a cold sore. I know that I've had 2 cold sores in my life, and thus that means I do have the virus. It turned out not to be, but I was just like sharing this is the reality of our work. If we wake up with a tingly mouth, unfortunately, we ain't getting income that day and possibly not for the next week or whatever. And he really fixated on that video and was just making all these posts about how disgusting I am and how for a worker to post a video admitting that she has herpes is like the most disgusting thing you can do. And, how could people trust their sexual health with me? Just all this, like, obviously incredibly uneducated nonsense, stigma stuff. And, thankfully, not the entire industry, but everyone that I knew in the industry, which is a fair amount of people, were instantly like, no, it's fine. And we're very much on my side and very supportive, which is wonderful. Really, like, the community he also is one of those people that has created, 75 different Twitter accounts, and the community has been amazing. There's people I don't even really know who will send me a screenshot and say, hey, I just saw this account. Is this that guy? Alerting me to his presence so I can and it's the same as you, Holly, like with finding his name on that forum. Like you don't want to be obsessed with this person in the way that they're obsessed with you, but it's fully self-preservation that you need to keep tabs on them. Like and this is what's interesting. Like, a number of police officers said to me, oh, you should probably block him. And like, no fucking way. I need to know exactly what he is saying to me and what he's doing. Are you kidding me? I don't like, that's the only thing I have to protect myself is information. Me not receiving what he's saying is not helping me at all. I agree, don't provoke, don't respond. That's fine. But anyway, so that's another pet hate of mine. Look, now mostly he leaves me alone. I don't think he's contacted me in a while, but I do find out lots of stories through the grapevine. It's not unusual to have every few months a worker will be in my DMs and they'll say, hi, we don't know each other, but I've been spending a lot of time with this man lately and I don't know, I'm getting some weird vibes about him and he told me all these stories about you and now I'm not sure if they're true, And the one story that all of them have told me is that I've got a vendetta against him because one day he made a booking with me and then he came to the booking and I saw that he had a rash on his leg. And so I said that he had like failed the health check and kicked him out, but kept all of his money. Which, I mean, obviously it's not true, but I can tell you, like, there are so many elements of that I can tell you for a fact are not true. Obviously, I've never met him. I've also never once had someone fail a health check, which is wild, but true. And if somebody had a rash on their leg, I would know that that was not an STI, obviously, because I'm not a fucking idiot like he is. And if that had happened, I would have continued with the service and either covered it up or something, or asked him to leave and given him his money back because I'm a de-escalator. So anyway, it doesn't matter. Obviously, the story's not true, but multiple women have come to me and sort of said, oh, yeah, I believed all these stories about you. And then now I'm thinking he's a bit weird. I'm like, yes, babe, welcome, which, sorry, I shouldn't, they're victims too. But anyway, that's the extent of it now. Just every few months, I get a DM and I go, oh, yeah, here we go again. But for the most part, it's all over. Maybe, hopefully. Probably not after I made this podcast, which, as we said, we still have concerns about it.
And this is the sad pervasiveness of it, is that there will be people who hear this sort of stuff who go, oh, well, they're not violent. They didn't hurt you or whatever. But it and even sort of like you had described that earlier, when you hear these sorts of things, until it happens to you, you don't understand the weight of it on you. The feeling that somebody is always watching you is really deeply disturbing. especially when they keep escalating it in a variety of ways, like changing their creating new social media accounts, creating these whole narratives like this guy did, or like I saw David in the forums create these conspiracies about what workers were all doing to damage clients, and this sort of behavior that becomes increasingly unhinged, and knowing that this person that is doing these unhinged things is fixated on you is really, really disturbing. And it's so upsetting.
Yeah, I mean, like the bulk of this stuff happened 5 years ago, and Holly can attest to the fact that my face is bright red. I feel really hot and flushed. My heart is beating really fast, and I've had to stop and breathe a few times. Like I'm okay. Like I feel okay. I don't feel upset, but my body is telling me otherwise. Like it's very clear that it still kicks my nervous system into gear.
We recorded this podcast today late because I couldn't sleep very well last night, and I was certain last night, and I'm still pretty certain, that it's because I've been reflecting on all of this, and it had made me, again, like you said, I'm okay. I'm not anxious actively, but there's obviously things in me that have gone, be alert, which is crazy that, David's not even on this planet anymore. But there's something obviously that...
Do you know what? I could not sleep last night either. And I assumed I didn't connect it until right now, but it could have been that too.
As always, we'd like to extend a massive thank you to our generous patrons. We probably couldn't keep the show going without you, or it would certainly be a little bit less motivating. Thank you to our even more generous somebodies, the Riley McDonald, the Desiree Frambois, the Ashley Stafford, the Rhiannon Rhodes, Lachlan, Timmy, Steve, Adele, Scott C, Leslie, Sub London, NK, Andrew, Wheezy, Mr. E, Simon, Nomad, Luke, Frankie, Cuddle Koala, Witty Comment, Alex and David. And an extremely generous thank you to our extremely generous somebodies, the Madison Jones, the Sienna Saint, Aaron, Andrew, Adam Smith, Pete, Tim and Tom.
So it's just Jenna now. Holly had to run off to a booking because she had not showered or done anything, and the booking is in half an hour. And in the last couple of weeks preparing this episode, I said to her multiple times, this is so going to be a two-parter. And she was like, I don't think it'll take too long. And I just want to take this opportunity while I'm here alone. And she doesn't listen to the episodes anyway. So she'll never know that I did this. But I just wanted to say that I was right. And so this is going to be a two-parter, which you probably already know from the title anyway. So next time, we each have another story, but I think these ones are smaller stories, the next two that are coming up. And then we're going to reflect a little bit on what some of the red flags are, what we maybe would do differently next time, if anything, the process of seeking justice for this sort of thing, parasocial relationships, and talk a little bit about gender. And, all of the stories we're sharing are about men, and we want to talk about whether this is just a man thing. Spoiler, it's not. So that's all for today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. We both, I'm sure Holly appreciates you too, for sticking it out, because we talked about some dark shit today. But I think it's super, super important. I'm really excited that we've been able to do this episode. So we'll see you next time. Bye. Please look out for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. Our name everywhere is Somebody You Pod, as in podcast. Our Patreon starts at just $3 a month, and you can get all of our episodes ad-free and a day early, plus bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes action, bloopers, and more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the voices of sex workers. And remember, somebody you love might just be a sex worker.